There will be those who read the title to this and immediately draw the conclusion that it is a clickbait headline stuffed with hyperbole. However, as harsh as it may sound, it is absolutely true that Holly Holm must defeat Amanda Nunes at UFC 239 or else her legacy will be tied to that of James "Buster" Douglas. It'll be a legacy that is defined by her pulling off arguably the biggest upset in MMA history when she stopped the seemingly indestructible Ronda Rousey on November 15, 2015, and that's it. Join DAZN and watch more than 100 fight nights a year. The rest of Holly Holm's career as a mixed martial artist will be met with a shrug of indifference because nobody will care. That is what we call a career that ends up being memorialized as little more than the answer to a trivia question. It's the newer version of Who Beat Mike Tyson on Feb. 11, 1990. Never mind that Holly Holm came into this sport as a highly decorated boxer who transitioned rather seamlessly into mixed martial arts. People will overlook her being a two-time Ring Magazine Fighter of the Year, 2005. As unfair as it is, Holly Holm's entire legacy will be tied to Ronda Rousey. That is, unless she goes out there and puts an end to the torrid run that Amanda Nunes has been on that currently has her lined up as the greatest female mixed martial artist of all time. It's arguably the biggest swing of a legacy that hinges on one fight in recent memory. Come out victorious, and the conversations of the greatest female fighter of all time will start up again. Lose and you are effectively Buster Douglas. For the sake of not sounding hyperbolic, allow the parallel to be drawn between the careers of Holm and Douglas. For Douglas, the path to Mike Tyson was unimportant. Instead, he was set to become Tyson's latest victim when the two were scheduled to meet on that fateful February night in Tokyo. It was less about Douglas and more about the expectations of Tyson annihilating yet another foe. Heading into the fight, Tyson decimated Carl "The Truth" Williams in 90 seconds. Prior to that, Frank Bruno met his demise in the 5th round, and that came after Iron Mike steamrolled Michael Spinks in yet another 90-second demonstration of brutalization. Tyson was no longer competing with whoever was the ring as much as he was with history. The conversation of being the greatest boxer of all time was picking up tremendous steam at this point. Premature? Probably. But that's where we were. Buster Douglas was supposed to be just another victim for Tyson to annihilate, as evidenced by the fact that he was a 42-1 underdog. And then, the fight happened. For Holm, the same can be said as her journey to Ronda Rousey was not nearly as important as the devastation that was left in the wake of the Rowdy one. In the 4 fights before the slated showdown with Holm at UFC 193, Rousey defeated her opponents in a combined time of 2 minutes and 10 seconds. Jokes of her fights being just long enough for an Instagram video filled up social media. As ridiculous as it sounds today, there were grumblings of Rousey being able to beat boxing's undefeated pound-for-pound king, Floyd Mayweather Jr., in a fight. Forget being the greatest female mixed martial artist of all time, Rousey was featured on the cover of Sports Illustrated with the headline boldly proclaiming her as the world's most dominant athlete. Rousey wasn't just defeating opponents, she was devouring them. She had only been out of the first round once in her MMA career to that point and had a public mystique where an opponent only got in the way of her performance. Holly Holm was just collateral damage on Rousey's journey to greatness. The casual fan who purchased the UFC 193 pay-per-view had no idea that Holm was 9-0 heading into that fight. The hardcore fan figured that Holm's lack of a ground game would become her undoing as Rousey would notch yet another decisive submission victory. Holm was as much as a 20-1 underdog at some sportsbooks. Once again, the fight had to happen. We know how these respective stories ended. Both Holm and Douglas unlocked the cheat code to defeat Rousey and Tyson while effectively sinking their respective battleships that were loaded with hype. Rousey was never the same and subsequently thumped by Amanda Nunes a year later that sent her to the wonderful world of professional wrestling. Tyson's career was derailed by a prison stint and a pair of losses to Evander Holyfield before ending his career on a whimper after quitting against Kevin McBride in 2005. What's really important to this story is what happened to both Holm and Douglas after shocking the world. Douglas rose to immediate fame, running the talk show circuit and starring in his own video game. But just as quickly as he won the title, he gave it away. Holyfield only needed 3 rounds to end the fairy tale and Douglas never again found himself in a meaningful fight. A first-round knockout loss to Lou Savarese effectively sealed his fate as a one-hit wonder. Holm is very close to finding herself in the same unenviable position. After pulling off arguably the biggest upset in mixed martial arts history, Holm ran the talk show circuit and was being crowned as the new GOAT in women's MMA history. But, like Douglas, she only had a cup of coffee in the spotlight and dropped the women's bantamweight title in her next fight against Miesha Tate. A pair of underwhelming performances led to decision losses to future strawweight champion Valentina Shevchenko and Germaine de Randamie, with the latter being a fight that was supposed to position Holm as the inaugural UFC featherweight champion and set up a showdown with Chris Cyborg. A loss to Cyborg was sandwiched between a pair of victories against lesser opponents in Beta Koheta and Megan Anderson. A 2-4 record after beating Rousey is hardly the path to another title opportunity. But this fight is more about Nunes beating everyone who has held that bantamweight title than it is about Holm's redemption song. Although she may not acknowledge it publicly, the thought of this being her last chance certainly has had to cross Holm's mind. At 37, she's no spring chicken in MMA and a loss will absolutely send her careening to the back of the line. Like the fight with Rousey, Holm is a significant underdog to the woman who ran roughshod over both Rousey and Cyborg. Simply put, Holly Holm must beat Amanda Nunes. There are no ifs, ands or buts about it. Realistically, losing to Nunes leaves Holm with a mountain too high to climb in order to challenge for a world title again. But a victory changes the entire narrative. If Holm were to pull off yet another upset, the case for the greatest female mixed martial artist of all time is open all over again. A pair of victories against Rousey and Nunes during their respective rises will put her in rarefied air. Nobody will remember those underwhelming performances. Instead, the highlight reel will feature her kicking Rousey in the head and whatever she ends up doing against Nunes. Unfortunately, there is no consolation prize for putting up a good fight. It's either etch your name in the history books as the first 2-time champion in women's bantamweight history and the only woman in UFC history to regain a title in any weight class, or it's become a trivia question. It's up to Holly Holm to tell her story at UFC 239 before somebody else tells it for her. Let's block ads. Why?